What happens when loyalty finally runs out? Not gradually. Not through a slow erosion of trust that both sides can see coming from a distance and prepare for. But suddenly. Violently. In a moment that strips away every carefully maintained professional relationship and reveals what was sitting underneath it all along. That is the question that the baseball world woke up to. That is the image that spread across every platform, every group chat, every sports desk from Los Angeles to Tokyo within hours of the final out being recorded. And that is the story that resulted in one of the most significant disciplinary decisions the league has handed down in recent memory. Mike Trout. Former teammate. Former friend. The man who shared a clubhouse with Shohei Ohtani for years, who stood beside him through injuries and losing seasons and the particular frustration of watching extraordinary individual talent go unrewarded by team success, allegedly involved in a post-game incident so serious that a 3-game suspension has now been confirmed. The details are still emerging. The reactions have been immediate and overwhelming. And the question sitting at the center of all of it, how did it come to this, does not have a simple answer. But it has a real one. And understanding it requires going back further than the post-game tunnel where everything finally broke apart. There are no incidents without context. There are no moments of rupture that arrive without the accumulated weight of everything that came before them. To understand what allegedly happened after that game, to understand how Mike Trout and teammates could find themselves at the center of a story this serious, you first need to understand what the relationship between these men actually looked like, and what it became after Ohtani left Anaheim. For years, Trout and Ohtani existed as the twin pillars of an Angels franchise that perpetually promised more than it delivered. Two of the most gifted players of their generation, sharing a dugout, sharing a season, sharing the particular frustration of watching playoff baseball from home every October while their individual performances continued to generate numbers that had no business belonging to a losing team. That shared experience creates bonds. Anyone who has competed alongside another person through difficult circumstances understands this. The losing, paradoxically, can pull people closer than the winning. Because losing together requires a kind of daily recommitment, a choice, made repeatedly, to keep showing up and keep trying despite results that make showing up feel increasingly pointless. Ohtani made that choice every day he wore an Angels uniform. So did Trout. And for a time, that shared commitment created something genuine between them. Then Ohtani left. And everything that had been building beneath the surface of that shared commitment began to find new shape. It is important to note that the tension between Trout and Ohtani's departure was not immediately visible. In the first months after the move to the Dodgers was announced, Trout's public comments were measured. Professional. The kind of carefully worded acknowledgments that athletes produce when they understand that the full truth of what they feel is not something the public moment requires them to share. But professional composure has limits. And as the 2024 season unfolded, as Ohtani's performance in Los Angeles reached levels that made his Angels years look like a prologue rather than a story, those limits began to show. People close to the Angels organization described a shift in atmosphere around Trout specifically. Not dramatic. Not the kind of thing that would show up in a press conference or a post-game interview. But present. A tension that those who knew him well could detect in the way he spoke about certain topics, in the silences that replaced words he had previously been willing to say. The complicated truth is that watching Ohtani thrive in Los Angeles, watching him win, watching him perform at a level that the Angels never provided the supporting cast to unlock, forced a reckoning that Trout had not fully prepared himself for. That reckoning does not excuse what allegedly happened after the game. Nothing excuses what allegedly happened after the game. But it provides the emotional architecture that makes a moment like this comprehensible, even if it remains, in every meaningful sense, indefensible. The key here is the location. Because the choice of where and when this incident allegedly occurred tells its own story. Not on the field. Not in the visible, documented space where cameras track every movement and every expression. But in the post-game tunnel, the corridor that connects the playing field to the private spaces of a major league ballpark. A space that exists, in normal circumstances, as a kind of decompression zone, where the performance ends and the person begins again. What witnesses described in that tunnel was not a heated verbal exchange that escalated unexpectedly. It was not the chaotic product of adrenaline and competition that occasionally produces regrettable moments between athletes who have just spent 3 hours in intense opposition. It was, according to those present, something more organized than that. More deliberate. Trout was not alone. Teammates were involved. And Ohtani, moving through that tunnel with the same quiet purposefulness that defines his post-game routine, was not prepared for what he walked into. The incident was physically serious enough that it could not be contained, managed, or quietly resolved before word began to spread. By the time the relevant parties had been separated and the situation assessed, the decision to involve league officials had already been made by those with the authority to make it. And once league officials were involved, the documentation of what had occurred became a matter of official record. Swift. Unambiguous. Those are the two words most consistently used to describe the league's handling of what was brought to their attention. A 3-game suspension, confirmed. For Trout specifically, the number carries weight that extends beyond the games themselves. This is a player whose career has been defined, in part, by his professionalism. By the consistency with which he has conducted himself across a career that has generated Hall of Fame credentials despite the team's success that never materialized around him. A 3-game suspension does not erase that history. But it marks it. Permanently. In the official record of a career that deserved to be measured by different kinds of entries. It is important to understand what the league was communicating through the speed and clarity of this decision. They were not interested in a lengthy process of competing narratives and carefully managed public statements. The documentation was clear. The witnesses were credible. And the nature of what had occurred, the deliberateness of it, the location of it, the involvement of multiple parties in what happened to one person, demanded a response that left no room for ambiguity about where the league stood. 3 games. Confirmed. And with it, an implicit message to every player in every organization across the sport. This is the line. It has always been the line. And the prominence of the people involved in crossing it does not change what crossing it costs. When the Dodgers organization received full confirmation of what had occurred in that post-game tunnel, the response was not measured or diplomatic in the way that organizational responses to sensitive situations typically are. Dave Roberts, by all accounts, was furious in a way that those around him rarely witness. This is a manager whose professional composure is one of his defining characteristics, a person who processes difficult situations with a patience and deliberateness that his players consistently cite as one of the most stabilizing forces in the clubhouse. What happened to Ohtani in that tunnel moved him past that composure quickly. Because Roberts understands something about Ohtani that the suspension numbers and the incident reports will never fully capture. He understands the daily investment that Ohtani makes, the relentless, unglamorous, deeply personal work of preparing his body and his mind to perform at the level he performs at. He understands the discipline that goes into every meal, every recovery session, every hour of preparation that the public never sees. And he understands that what was done to Ohtani in that tunnel was not just a physical act. It was an attempt to reach into that carefully constructed world and damage it. To take something from a person who has never taken anything from anyone, who has simply shown up, done the work, and let the results speak for themselves. That understanding is what made Roberts's fury personal rather than professional. And it is what has driven the Dodgers' response in the days since, protective, firm, and entirely without the diplomatic hedging that situations like this sometimes produce from organizations more concerned with managing perception than with standing clearly on the right side of something. He has not spoken extensively about what happened. Those who know him well were not surprised. Ohtani's relationship with public disclosure has always been selective in a way that reflects something fundamental about his character. He shares what serves a purpose. He withholds what would only generate noise. And in this situation, where anything he said publicly would become a headline, a talking point, a piece of content to be processed and reprocessed through every available media channel. Silence is its own kind of statement. It says that he is not interested in a public battle. It says that the appropriate authorities have been made aware of what occurred and have responded accordingly. It says that his energy belongs to the preparation and performance that have defined his career, not to the management of a situation that other people created and other institutions are now responsible for resolving. His teammates have spoken through their presence. Roberts has spoken through his fury and his advocacy. The league has spoken through the suspension. Ohtani has spoken through the one language he has always been most fluent in. He showed up to the next game. He prepared. He played. Pull back from the tunnel. Pull back from the suspension and the furious manager and the silence of the most famous player in baseball. And ask the question that this entire situation, underneath all its specific details, is really asking. What does it mean when the people who knew Ohtani best, who shared a clubhouse with him, who competed beside him, who watched him become what he became from the closest possible distance, respond to his success with something like this? It means that greatness generates reactions that the people experiencing those reactions do not always understand or control. It means that proximity to extraordinary achievement is not the same as immunity to the complicated feelings that achievement can produce in the people surrounding it. And it means that even the most professional environments, populated by the most accomplished athletes, are not insulated from the deeply human dynamics that this situation has exposed. Mike Trout is facing a 3-game suspension and a question about his legacy that will not resolve itself quickly or cleanly. The teammates involved are facing their own consequences. And the Angels organization is navigating a moment that no team wants to navigate, one that requires accountability without the comfort of clean answers. Ohtani, meanwhile, is doing what he has always done. Preparing. Performing. Letting the work be the response. Because for him, it has never been anything else.